So we've seen how array works in Solidity, and now on our bucket list there are mappings. So mappings are these things, this data structure in Solidity that stores key value pairs. And this is mostly, as you can probably imagine, used to store balances. So you would have a mapping that stores addresses and their balance. This is used for allowances and things like that. They're pretty simple. They are used, for example, you cannot iterate through them like you would in arrays, but you can take the key and get the value. This is what they're used for. This is how you define one. You just use the mapping keyword, and then inside you would have to provide the key type and then the value type. And I've defined balances. This is going to be public. Also, what you can do is you can nest them. You can nest one mapping inside another, as I have done here, and I've called this allowances. And what this does is, for example, allowances are basically these things where let's say I would like to allow other address to spend my cryptocurrency on my behalf, and this is what I'm saving here. So this is my address, and I'm allowing this address to either spend or not spend my money, and this is why I have a boolean value here. I'm just storing whether this address saved here can or cannot spend my money. And this is how you would use balances. So these are similar like arrays, but you have to use the balance, of course, their name, and then in these brackets you would provide the key address. In this example, you provide the key, and this is what is going to return you. Let's not focus on this part for now. This is, and this is going to provide the actual value. So you tell the balances your key and you get the value, or in this case their balance. And I'm going to, here what I'm doing is just adding 10. As I said in the previous video, in balances or in any Solidity variable you have default value. So if we're to check this address balance before we run this function, it's going to be 0, because that's the default value of uint. And we're going to run this contract and see everything in practice. But I have here an add allowance function. This is external, and here it's a little bit more complex. We have different syntax because we have a nested mapping in here. And what I'm doing is accessing the allowances mapping, and here I need to provide an address to get this mapping, and this address would be the message.sender. If you didn't know, this message.sender is a built-in variable which just gets the address that called this function. And what I'm doing here is I'm saying, hey, I want my address, I want this address to spend money on behalf of my address, which is this one. And here in only this syntax, what I'm doing is getting the mapping, and here I need to provide again another address because I'm getting the mapping, and then I'll get the value of this mapping, which is this boolean, and I'm setting this to true. This by default would be false. So I've talked a lot and you probably have an idea, but let's save this. Let's compile this contract, go into the deploy section, let's try to deploy this, and I'm going to use this address C4 to deploy this contract. So I've deployed the contract, and let's now copy this address. This is the first one, C4, and let's check out its balance. So just paste this here, click on balances, and you can see the actual balance is 0. And now if I click on add balance, it's going to add balance to it's going to add 10 balance to this address. Now if I check the balances, you can see it has updated to 10. And let's use the second function. Let's add allowance, and I'm going to call this add allowance function with my first address, which is C4, and I'm going to allow this address, the second address, which I have already pasted here, to spend my money. So let's go ahead and just call this add allowance function. Now what I can do is, after this function is finished, this is set to true, and I'm going to go up here and we can check the allowances, and for this we need two addresses. This is going to be the first address, or my address, and I'm going to paste this here, and you need to separate this with comma, very important stuff. And I'm going to copy the second address. This is the address that I'm allowing it to spend my crypto. So let's separate this by comma, paste this here, click on allowances, and this should be true now, as you can see. And now if I copy another address, this is the third one, and if I paste this here as the second address, let's see if I have allowed this address to spend my money. This should be equal to false, because the default value of boolean is false, even though we haven't added this address to the mapping.